Hello, everybody. Let's get started with our webinar. Let me pull up the slides here. So let's talk about the agenda. First of all, introductions. My name is Amol Dalvi. I am the product manager at Azure, and I'll be your host and presenter for today's webinar. The couple of items that we'll be talking about, one is we'll go through what is Nerdio for Azure and what is Nerdio Admin Portal. I will be then spending a majority of my time in our webinar today talking about Nerdio Admin Portal. So we go through and do a deep dive of the portal and a walkthrough, and I'll show you all the features of the portal. And at the end, we'll have some time for Q&A and some wrap-up questions at the end. Feel free to ask questions as we go along here. The chat window in your upper left, or you might have to click a button to open up the chat window in your upper left there. Is the best way to ask questions. I'll be monitoring for questions and answering questions as we go along, and we'll also, of course, have time at the end there. All right, with that, let's jump into the agenda here. First, I'm going to talk about what is Nerdio for Azure. So Nerdio for Azure, it's basically an IT automation platform. It's a platform that enables provisioning, management, and optimization of complete virtual desktop-centric IT environments in the Azure environment, in the Azure cloud. So when we talk about a complete IT environment, there are 5 core technologies that basically make up that IT environment. First of all, you need to have desktops. So in the case of a virtual IT environment, we have virtual desktops. Along with those desktops, you need to have servers. So these could be system servers like domain controllers, or these could be servers like file servers and print servers and the database servers that power your IT environment. You need some sort of a collaboration software like Office 365. And of course, security and backup and disaster recovery are just important to keeping everything secure and making sure you're able to respond to any threats. So those are the 5 core components of any IT environment. And what we have done is we have standardized those 5 core components and added on a management layer. That's the Nerdio Admin Portal. And that management layer basically enables 3-click management. So for example, if you wanted to create a new user, like a new employee comes on board and you wanted to create a new user, it takes 3 clicks to do that. If you needed to spin up a new server, it takes 3 clicks to do that. Another major piece of this layer is the ID automation. We make it extremely easy to provision brand new environments, and then dynamic onboarding. We make it extremely easy to move from the old environment over to the Nerdio environment. And all of that together is basically Nerdio. So it's that 5 core components there, plus this management layer on top. That's what basically Nerdio is. And then on top of that, as a service provider, you can layer on your various services to this offering. So you can be supporting line of business applications, or you could be helping customers migrate over. You could be providing IT strategy, monitoring, ongoing support. All of those things are services you can provide in addition to these core technologies. And if we take all these core technologies and all these services and move them into the Azure cloud, that's what Nerdio for Azure is. So it's taking those basically core technologies and those management layer and making it all work in the Azure environment. So what does that look like in the Azure environment, right? So what is this, just to kind of get a little technical here, how do we spin up those virtual desktops and the servers and the collaboration and all that? So basically what Nerdio does is it carves out a piece of the Azure cloud and spins up this environment. So what you have is up here you see as you are able to select what primary region in Azure you want to spin up this IT environment. And then within that region, first of all, you have a DMZ, a demilitarized zone, which hosts the proxy server and hosts a RD gateway. Behind the DMZ is the actual LAN network, On the left-hand side here, you can see the different servers that are spun up in the environment. And on the right-hand side here, you can see the infrastructure for delivering desktops. So for example, here on the left-hand side, you can see, we spin up a file server by default that's for file shares and print services. And of course, you also need a server that serves up DNS and DHCP, Active Directory, all that stuff. So there's a domain controller. And then in addition to that, you can also spin up other servers that you might need. For example, you might need an application server or a database server, depending upon your business needs. On the right-hand side here, you can see there is a shared desktop environment for RDS users, and then there is a dedicated desktop environment for VDI users. So that's all housed over here. And all of this is backed up to another region using ARS replication. Using Azure's replication services, basically we provide in-region backups and out-of-region DR. So that's the high-level technical architecture there. The secret sauce to making all of this available is that second ring, that layer that I mentioned. That's the Nerdio admin portal. And Nerdio admin portal has certain essential functions that make it what it is. First of all, there is automated provisioning, and I'll show you all this in a minute here in the demo. But basically, with automated provisioning, you're able to spin up that IT environment that we just saw in a couple of hours in an Azure environment. There's 3-click management, like I mentioned, where you can take most actions with 3 clicks. There's backup and DR automation. Again, like I mentioned, there's in-region backup and out-of-region DR that's provided. There are various onboarding tools that make it very easy to move customers off their old environments to their new environment. There's intelligent auto-scaling, and this is important, especially in the Azure world, where compute resources are quite expensive. Though that's normally the biggest cost component. So with intelligent auto-scaling, what NAP does is that it automatically downsizes servers, or it even shuts them down during off-peak hours. So that saves on compute resources and the cost associated with them. And finally, there is performance monitoring. And this performance monitoring is beyond just looking at CPU utilization or hard disk I/O information. It's more from a user perspective. So for example, the performance monitoring will actually look and see how long does it take to open up a Word on a desktop, right? That's real user performance. It looks and sees how long it takes to actually send an email out of Outlook. Those are real user-centric performance metrics. All right, so that's a little bit of introduction to Nerdio for Azure and the portal. Now I'm going to switch over to the actual software itself and walk through that. So let me switch over to my browser here. All right, so I'm on the login page of Nerdio admin portal. I'm going to log in as partner. So I'm a fictitious partner of Nerdio's, my MSP out there. I've already signed up, and I'm going to log in. Once I log in, the first page I come up to is this Nerdio accounts page. So what I'm seeing here is these are my customers that I have under management. So as an MSP, obviously I wouldn't have just one customer. I could have 1, 2, 5, 10 different customers that I'm managing. So for each of those customers here, I'll see a row listed over here. Now this admin portal over here, you can see there's a main menu on the left-hand side. There's a home page where I can see some basic information about my account. I can get some account summary information down here. I get some instructions to setting up accounts, any announcements, recent feature releases, things like that. The accounts page, we just talked about that. There's billing information, so I can see any invoices that I have due. There's logs that allow me to look at different activity inside the Nerdio admin portal. And finally, there are some settings that I can turn on as well. Let's focus on the Nerdio accounts screen here first. This is where the most of the activity will happen. So what's going on here is, like I mentioned, there's 3 different accounts that I have under management. And if I wanted to spin up an IT environment for a new customer, all I have to do is simply come in here and click on this button here called Add NFA Account. NFA, of course, stands for Nerdio for Azure. So I'm just going to click on Add NFA Account. Up here are some instructions for me on how to set up this account. But down here is where all the meat of it is. First of all, step number 1, it's asking me to enter some company information. So let's just say this is company called Demo June 15. The number of employees at this company, let's just say it's going to be between 100 to 249. And then in which Azure region do I want to spin up this IT environment? So you can see in this drop down, we list out all the different Azure regions. As new regions are brought up by Microsoft, we list them over here as well. And then you can see some of these regions are GPU capable. With GPU capable, you get these advanced functionality where you can have N series desktops that allow for very graphic intensive desktops. So for example, if you have users that have to do CAD CAM operations, those users typically require graphic intensive work, and you would then spin them up in a GPU capable region. Next step, you would enter in the Office 365 admin username and password. And then you would also enter in the Azure admin username and password. Okay. Once you have entered in those usernames and password, you would click Save, and that's it. That would spin up the new IT environment. So I'm not going to do that right now. Typically, the process takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours. But I just wanted to show you that it's extremely easy to create a new IT environment. So that's the steps I went through to set up the IT environment for this demo account over here called Strongheart LLC. And I'm going to go ahead and log in to this customer account. So this button over here actually lets me log into that customer's account. And now you can see the screen has kind of changed quite a bit here. The main menu on the left-hand side has completely changed. There's lots of different options here on the home page. So what I've basically done is I have now left the partner admin portion and I'm logged into the customer directly. So over here you can see I have logged into Strongheart LLC. I've got a series of menu options here on the left-hand side. And on the home page, I get some basic account summary information. I can see I've logged into account ID 5001. Here's the company name. Here are different domains that are under management. Here's a good breakdown of what kind of activities are happening in my account. And I've got 6 users under management. There are 10 Active Directory groups. There's a shared mailbox and so on. Over here, there are some announcements. Just for example, the same announcements we saw earlier. There's a new way to manage firewall from within NAP itself, for example. And then there's some charts down here around desktop usage and login patterns and some recent NAP activity. I'll circle back to these things towards the end after we have gone through the other screens. Up here in the left-hand side, you can see this module called Users. So each of these items here on the left-hand side are called modules. So I've clicked in on users, and I can now see the different users under management. So I've got Andy, I've got Angie, I've got Chad and John and so on and so forth. All of these are users that have desktops that I'm managing for them. For example, Angie accounting over here, we can see her email address, we can see her username, we can see she's a RDS user assigned to the RDSH01 server, and the server is in the South Central region, and this is when Angie last logged in. There's a drop down over here that lets me enable or disable that login. So for example, if Angie were going on an extended vacation, and during that extended vacation time frame for security reasons, we wanted to make sure that nobody logged in to her desktop, we can simply come in here and disable login. This column over here shows us the Active Directory groups the user belongs to. And in the case of Chat CEO, you can see there's a more link over here. If I click on more, it lists out all the other Active Directory groups that Chad is a part of. Okay, back on Angie's record, you can see there's an action menu over here. The first option there is to generate a IDP file. So as an RDS user, Angie is going to need a IDP file on her desktop to log into this virtual desktop. So you would simply click on Generate IDP File, and there's some options that come up here now. I can select what sort of settings I want in the IDP file, and then I can either choose to download this file immediately, or I can email this file to Angie. So here's an example of what that email would look like. Pretty simple email. It includes the attached IDP file and has a link out to some instructions on how to log in. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and download this IDP file. Okay, and I've got this IDP file downloaded. Now I'm going to switch context here. I'm going to pretend I'm Angie and I have this IDP file. I'm going to show you what Angie's experience is going to be. So as Angie, I will simply open up that IDP file. It's already got my username in there. All I need to do is type in my password. And now I'm connecting out to my virtual desktop. So this is literally how Angie would use the virtual desktop, or any end user would use their virtual desktop. They are essentially simply connecting to their virtual desktop using the IDP file, and all they need to do is enter in their password. And it's a fully functional Windows desktop. You can install apps on here. There's Office on here if the user has Office credentials. There's the browsers on here, and so it's a pretty standard desktop. Not a whole lot to show here, but just wanted to show you from a end user's experience. They are logging into Windows just like they log into any other Windows desktop. I'm going to go ahead and sign out. So I'm out of this virtual desktop, and I'm back in Nerdio admin portal, and I'm back to pretending to be in that MSP partner who is managing the customer's account on their behalf. All right, let's look at some of the other actions. If Angie were to call in and say that, hey, I forgot my password, can you set a new password for me? It's a simple matter of selecting reset password. And at this point, you would confirm that you want to reset the password. I don't want to change Angie's password here, but what I can do is I can change the password for this demo user over here. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on reset password. And it's saying, hey, are you sure you want to reset the password? I'm going to say yes, I want to do that. And what it does now is a couple of things. First of all, it's given us the default password it's set for the user. And then it's also given us an option to email that password out to the user. So for example, if I wanted to see what that email looks like, here's what that email looks like. It's a well-formatted email. It highlights the password. And then it also gives them instructions on what to do once they log in to change their password. Okay. And you may have seen this in the background. This user row was locked out while the user's password was being changed. So I can't take any other actions on this user while their password has been reset, or any other activities are going on. But what does happen is that down here, there is a section called User Management Tasks. This is where we can see a task was logged to reset the password for John Demo 9. and it's now complete. Took about a minute or so, but during that minute or so, this user's row was locked out and I can't take any other action. All right, let's go back to Angie accounting. The next thing I can do is I can reset RDS session. So if the user were to call in and say, hey, my desktop's frozen, I can't move my mouse, something's going on, can you just reset it for me? It's as simple as coming into Nerdio admin portal, go to the users module, look for the user, and simply select reset desktop. Next option here is to revert profile. Unfortunately, a common problem with Windows is that the user's profile can get corrupted from time to time. And in that situation, typically the best thing to do is to simply revert their profile to an earlier point in time. So that's what this option does over here. Once you select revert profile, it's pulled up this pop-up window over here. It's asking me to confirm the action I'm taking, but it's also showing me the points in time I can revert back to. So if I wanted to revert back to, let's say, yesterday's profile, I simply select that date. And the next thing I have to do is I have to check this box before I can actually click confirm. And in this case, we make you sort of check that box to make sure you really understand what's going on here, which is you're reverting the user's profile. You're going to overwrite the current profile. You'll also need to reboot the user's desktop, and we want to make sure that the user is not going to log into the desktop until the task is completed. So I'm just going to go ahead and click cancel on that. Okay, a few more options here. First of all, I can edit these users' profile attributes. So for example, I can simply click edit user here, or I can also just click on the name of the user and go into the edit screen. This edit screen gives me access to lots of different things here. First of all, the first name and last name. I can decide what the primary email address is. I can decide what the mobile number assigned to this user is. And that phone number there is quite important, because once you enter in a phone number, a mobile number for the user, what the system's going to do is going to use that mobile number for two-factor authentication. So earlier you saw me log in to Angie Accounting's desktop, and all I had to do was type in my password. But if I had the mobile number in here as well, then I would be prompted to enter in a passcode that would be texted to me. That would be an additional layer of security there. I can add some additional email addresses. So for example, if in addition to A accounting, I also wanted to assign Angie at to this user, I could do that. I can decide if the username is going to be the same as the primary email address or not. I can control what Office 365 license is assigned to this user. And if this user happens to be an IT admin at the company, I can also grant them access to log into the portal. Down here, I can select what sort of desktop this user is going to be assigned. So as I mentioned earlier, this user is a RDS user, and they are assigned to RDSH01. But if I wanted to, I can also switch this user to be a VDI, a dedicated VDI desktop user. You can see over here, all I have to do is simply click on VDI, and then I select the desktop size that I want, or what kind of VM size I want to assign to this user. The system lists the most commonly used desktop sizes up here at the top. So these are sort of our suggestions as far as what VMs to use, but you are free to pretty much select any VM from any series. So for example, if this were a user that had graphic intensive needs, they would use the N series VMs, or if they wanted just a bigger VM from the D series, they can do that as well. So I'm going to leave this user as an RDS user and switch that back there. And this section over here lets me control what Active Directory groups the user belongs to. So this user has 3 groups that they belong to right now. If I wanted to add one more, I simply click in the box there, and it now lists the different groups. So I can just start typing in the name of the group that I'm looking for, select that group, and that's it. There's also some extended attributes. So for example, I can have the user's work number, fax number, website, address, that kind of information in here as well. And typically what we find is our customers will use this for the email signatures in their Outlook emails. All right, so now that I've made all these changes, all I have to now do is simply click Save. I get a confirmation message that yes, these changes have been processed and it's going to take a few minutes. So I click OK. And now you can see that this users row has been locked out because we have a task that's in progress. And you can see that task is now in progress and it's going to take a couple of minutes to complete. All right, in the meantime, let's take another user here. So we have got chat CEO, a couple more options. So these two options here, archive user and delete user, are used for offboarding an employee. So if you had an employee or a contractor that's leaving the organization, you have two options. You can either delete the user, which like the name suggests, it's a permanent delete. You're going to permanently remove the user's files and folders. The desktop will be destroyed. The user won't be able to log into the desktop, and you won't be able to get access to the user's files and folders. Here again, you have to actually check this box before you can click confirm, which I don't want to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and click cancel. But the other option for me to offboard an employee is to archive the user. And this one's sort of a soft delete, if you will. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm assigning a new owner for chat CEO. So for example, over here, I can say the new owner for chat is going to be Andy IT admin. So what the system's going to do, it's going to take the user's files and folders from the desktop and place them on Andy IT admin's desktop. And the desktop for this old user, it's going to be shut down and kept off to the side. So in the future, if I needed to restore that user, I can always gain access to that user's desktop. Again, I don't want to actually do this, so I'm going to go ahead and click cancel. All right, so that was offboarding an employee. For a couple of more things to show here, but I'm going to pause here for 30 seconds and see if anybody has any questions so far. All right, looks like there are no questions. So let's keep going here. A couple more things to show in the users module. First of all, onboarding an employee, or how do you get a new employee going. This all you have to do is simply click on the add new button. So there's the add new icon up here, or there is the add user button over here. So let's go ahead and enter in all the information here. There's, let's say, John Demo 15, and the email address is going to be John Demo 15, and there's no mobile number, so let's leave that blank. There's no email address, additional email address, so let's leave that as is. The username is same as the primary email address, so let's leave that as is. Office 365 license, I can assign this user any one of these licenses. For now, I'm just going to leave that as none. And then this user is not an IT admin, so I'm not going to check this box. And then this user is also going to be an RDS user. So I'm just going to select RDS, leave it as RDSH01. And then this user is going to be joining the finance department, and they're going to be just like Angie Accounting. So I'm going to select Angie Accounting from this box here. And what it does is it automatically pre-populates these Active Directory groups for me, as well as it would automatically pre-populate any extended attributes for this user from Angie Accounting if there were any. Finally, over here, there's the option for me to send a welcome email to the user. So this welcome email, let's take a look at the example. It's a way to sort of give the user instructions on how to log in and what server to connect to and what username and password they will have. So it's a nice way to sort of send that information off to them. You can either download that information or you can simply email it to them, maybe their personal email address. All right, so that's all I have to do. All I do is type in this information up here, select these options, and I click save. So now if I've got their temporary password that's available to me right here, I can take a look at it, or it would of course also be in that email that's sent out. So it's that easy to simply add a new user to the environment. The system's going to take care of adding them to Active Directory. It's going to take care of spinning up a desktop for them. It's going to take care of the groups. It's going to take care of Office 365. All of that automatically happens in the background. And you can see that task is now in progress and it's going to take a couple of minutes to run as well. All right, so that's the users module. Next, I'm going to talk about groups, that is Active Directory groups. This is where you can manage the groups in the IT environment. There's two kinds, distribution lists, and there are security groups. You can see the list here along with the email address for distribution list, a description, and then how many members are part of this group. There's two actions I can take. I can edit users or I can edit groups or delete groups. Editing a group is, again, you can simply click on the edit button here, or you can click on the name of the group. So on this edit screen, you can see the name, you can change the name, you can change the description, you can change the email address for this group, as well as you can control who the members are. So for example, if I wanted to add John Demo 9 in here, but remove John Smith from here, all I do is click that X there, and I click Save. Okay, I get that confirmation window just like before that the changes are in progress. It's going to take a few minutes to complete, and I click OK. All right, and we can see a task has been logged down here about updating the group, and that's in progress, and that's going to take a couple of minutes as well. Okay, similarly, there are shared mailboxes. So you can manage shared mailboxes just like you can manage Active Directory groups. There's just one shared mailbox in this demo account here. You can see the name, you can see the email address for this shared mailbox, and you can see the number of members that are part of the shared mailbox and who those members are. Again, you can simply edit or delete this shared mailbox. So to edit, I can click on the edit button, or I can click on the name. And on the edit screen here, I can change the name, I can change the email address, and similar to groups, I can control who the members of this shared mailbox are. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and click cancel. Okay, next is servers. This is another major module in the system. Just like users, we normally find our partners using the servers module quite a bit. And this is where the system lets you manage the various servers in the IT environment. These could be system servers like the domain controller or the proxy server, or it could be just other servers that you have spun up for your internal development. So just like the other screens, we can see a listing of the servers. There's a green icon here that shows this particular server is on. Here's the name of the server, the IP address, what's the operating system, and what region this server resides in. There's a description for this server that I can simply click on that icon there to edit the server's description. And then these two columns over here let me control the configuration of the server. So let's take a look at FSO1, the file server that we have. This server is a D1 V2 instance. It's a VM instance, D1 V2 in Azure, which is basically a one core 3.5 gig with the SSD drive. If I wanted to change the size of this VM, all I do is simply click on the icon there, and it's telling me, okay, here's my current size, and what's the new size I want to change it to. So I can either choose the series that I want to go for, and within each series, I can choose the particular VM instance size. Okay, and each of these series, there's a little explanation that tells you what these series are best for. For example, the D series is typically what we recommend for office IT environments. They support SSD disk, which is great for performance. And then there's the N series, which is they use SSD disk, but we can't switch to this because they don't support premium T series disks. There is the A series and there is the F series. Within the F series are more compute optimized. They are good fit for web servers and so on and so forth. Right. At this point, I'm just going to click cancel since I don't want to change the config there. The next option here is storage. So over here, I can control the disk sizes. So for example, I've got a data disk assigned to this file server here. What I can do is I can simply click on it and I can decide to upgrade the disk, right? So it's a P10 128 gig disk right now, and I can choose to upgrade it to a 512 or a 1020 or a 1 terabyte disk if I wanted to. What's nice is that NAP will also grow the Windows volume in addition to increasing the disk size. So typically that's like a two-step operation where you have to actually go into Windows and then grow the disk volume, grow the Windows volume, but do that all that for you. Right, I'm just going to go ahead and click cancel. There's an action menu here as well, quite a few options here. First of all, if you wanted to remote desktop into the server, you would need the RDP file. So you can generate the RDP file. Much like the earlier screen, you can select certain options and download the RDP file. You can also reboot the server. So for example, if you wanted to restart the server, you would simply select that option there. Or if you wanted to stop the server, you can select that option over there as well. You can add an additional disk to the server. So we see over here in the back, this server has an OS disk and one data disk. Oops, sorry, I clicked on that there. Let's go back into the pop-up. But if I wanted to add a second data disk to the server, I can simply use this pop-up, decide what the size of the disk is, leave this box checked to create the Windows volume in addition to adding the hard disk, and I would simply click confirm. Okay, and the final option is to manage the IP address. So for example, this particular server over here, it's in the LAN environment and has a static IP address assigned to it. So if I needed to change that IP address for some reason or even move it over to DHCP, I could do that. Right. So one thing you may have noticed here in this action menu, there's no way to actually destroy this server. Since this is a sort of a system server that's a file server, we don't even have the destroy option. But if you have your own server that you have spun up, this particular server over here does have the delete option available. So in this case, I would simply select delete. It would say, hey, are you sure you want to permanently delete this particular server? And then at this point, when I click OK, it's going to actually ask me that question again. Are you absolutely sure you want to delete this server? All right, I'm just going to go ahead and click cancel. And finally, to spin up a new server, all you do is simply click on add server. You give this server a name. Let's call it demo June 15. Decide what the operating system is. decide what the disk type is, and decide what the VM size is. Okay, so I'm just going to leave all the default options in place here and click OK. And what it does now is to add a task down here that says it's going to add a server. It's pending, it's going to get picked up. There we go, it's in progress now, and the server is going to get spun up here in a few minutes. All right, one more thing on this screen here. There is a way to manage golden desktop images. So as we saw in the picture and the architecture diagram earlier, the VDI desktops are spun up from a golden desktop image. And it's important to keep the golden desktop image up to date with latest Windows patches, or maybe there's a new application you want to roll out to all your users and you would want to install that on your golden desktop image. So in that case, what you would do is you would remote desktop into this particular IP address, and you would install the Windows patches or install the latest application, and then come back in here, and then you would simply power off this particular golden desktop image. So once you have done that, all new users going forward will be spun up, will have their desktop spun up from this new golden image, and you'll have the latest and greatest on those users. All right, I'm going to pause here for 30 seconds to see if anybody has any questions. I've got one quick question here about, is there a way for users to get their own RDP file? Yes, I will show you that here. I'll circle back to that question in a few minutes here. But yes, there is a way for users to get their own RDP file. Okay, let's keep going here. So other options here, you can manage certain network configurations as well. So for example, managing firewalls is extremely easy. There are certain rules that we set up for the firewall by default. So you can see these rules already listed here. This green icon over here tells me this is an inbound rule to allow. And this red icon over here, it's an outbound rule that denies certain things. So these are the rules for the LAN side of the network, and these are rules for the DMZ side of the network. And I can simply edit these rules, or I can add a new one as well. So if I click on add rule here, I'll show you this screen here really quick. I can enter the name of the firewall rule. I can enter the priority. I can decide the direction. I can control these different settings down here as well. All right, then there is the ability to manage VPN connections. So oftentimes you're going to have to set up a VPN connection between the Nerdio environment and the office environment to allow printing, for example, to a local printer at the office. So this is where you can manage those VPN connections, as well as we have this feature called on-ramp Azure regions, and this is quite important. So what happens is that the IT environment is spun up in a certain primary Azure region, like I've mentioned. But for some of our customers, they have distributed offices. Maybe they have spun up their spun up their IT environment in the West US region, but they have an office that's out in Europe. So the users in Europe, typically what they would do is they would connect to the region in the US over the public internet infrastructure. Instead, with the on-ramp Azure regions, what they can do is they can actually connect to the Microsoft Cloud from the West Europe region, and then from there they would connect to the primary region over the Microsoft backbone. So that obviously improves performance, and that's what on-ramp Azure regions let you do. Backup and DR, there's a way to see all the in-region backup that's going on. Okay, here we go. Up here, you can control if you want to even do backups or not. So that's on here, as you can see. You can see the system is saying the next backup is going to occur at 1 a.m. Central Time tonight. And here's a list of all the different VMs that are being backed up. So the green ones over here tell me for this particular VM, the backup has been enabled, and for this one, the backup has been disabled. But you can see for this DC01, for example, the last backup status is complete, and here's when I can restore back to. There's a few different options available here. I can either restore that VM right away, or I can back up that VM. Or if I did not want to include this particular VM in the backup procedure, I can remove it from the backup as well. And you can see over here, we not only back up the servers, but we also back up the workstations as well. All right, there's a onboarding tool available here for domain management. So every Nerdio account that you spin up will be assigned a certain domain based on the account ID. That's the default domain that's for this one. Since this is account ID 5001, the domain assigned is 5001.nerdio.net. But in addition to that, you can also add any of the customer's domain. Of course, you would need to be the owner of that domain because we need to verify ownership based on a DNS TXT record that we have you add to the DNS file. All right. Next is reports. There's a handy report called the users report that lists all the users and their status and the login information. So let me go ahead and click on the report. It's just a listing of the various users in the account. Nope. I've got a question here. Let me do that there. So there's a users report that lists all the users in the account. And this report is particularly useful typically, at the end of the month when you're invoicing your customer and you want to, the customer says, hey, how many users do I have? Do I really have so many Office 365 licenses? And are people really using my desktop? So it's a good sort of reconciliation report to share with the customer. The question I have here is to do with backups. So let me answer that question here real quick before moving on to the next topic. Backups, there is a way to restore files or folders. There's actually, what we do is we also do shadow copies of all files and folders. So you can always restore it back, restore a particular folder back based on the shadow file copies. But you have to restore the whole server from this backup procedure that you saw earlier in the backup module. All right, next next section here is the settings module. So there's some enhanced security I can enable. So for example, if I wanted to enable two-factor authentication for users to log into the portal, I can do that. Earlier I talked about two-factor authentication. That was for end users to log into their desktop. But in addition to that, you can also enable enhanced security. You can also enable two-factor authentication for users to log in to the portal. There are certain notifications you can choose to receive. So for example, if every time a user's login is enabled or disabled, or a password is reset, or if your desktop is reverted, you can choose to receive notifications for that. Similarly, you can choose to receive notifications about server operations like restarts and shutdowns. Or you can choose to receive some notifications about when an app user is added or somebody tries to log in with your username. Okay, next one is desktop auto scale. And this is that intelligent auto scaling feature that I was talking about at the very beginning of the presentation, where it's important to try and reduce the consumption of compute resources in the Azure environment. So in this case here, we have got these user profiles that you are to set up. You can see there's 3 user profiles. There's workaholic, productivity, and work-life balance. And for workaholic, we have currently set that these are users who want their desktop 24/7, while there could be some productivity users that typically need their desktops, let's say 10 hours a day and 6 days a week. And maybe there's a group of users that want their desktops only 10 hours a day, but 5 days a week. Okay. So over here, then I can control how my users are distributed. So for example, with Workaholic, I've got 6 users. I can simply click edit and I can change certain parameters here, right? So first of all, I can decide, is Workaholic something that's 24/7, or maybe it is 24/7, but 6 days a week, for example. And then down here, I can control who are these users that need their desktops 24/7, 6 days a week. So I can simply add in more usernames here if I wanted to do that. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and click cancel. But that's the way to assign who needs what desktops when. And then down here on the VM sizing action plans, this is where you can control how the desktop should be scaled up or scaled down. So for example, there is one RDS server that we have that's by default, it's a D1 V2 instance. But depending upon how many users are on that RDS server and when, we can sort of scale that server up or down. So I clicked on view plans there. And now what it's showing me that this is how I've got users on this server over time. So at 12 a.m. in the morning, I've got 5 users and it's going to be a D1 V2. And that's what it's going to stay until 7 a.m. And finally at 8 a.m. is when this particular server now has 6 users on it, but it's going to be left at a D1 V2. So we can always change that if you wanted to. So there's different options here. I can let NAP decide what that server should be resized to, or I can say, nope, I don't want to change it. I always want to leave it at the baseline, or I don't want to make any changes, or maybe I just want to power off the server completely, or I can choose a particular VM instance size. So this gives me fairly granular control over how that VM is downsized or upsized as users fall off or come on to the server. All right, next thing is logs. So I have access to fairly detailed logs as a IT admin. For example, over here, this one is a provisioning status log. And if I extend that out, what it's basically telling me back on April 16th was when this particular IT environment was spun up. And here are the 11 different steps that the system went through to spin up that IT environment. So there's different steps all the way ranging from setting up the private network, setting up the storage environment, the domain controller, and so on and so forth, setting up the first VDI desktop, and then just testing and finalizing everything. And you can see this took about an hour and a half to go through all those steps. Next, there are management tasks that I can look at. So all these different tasks that we have been doing today, I can see what the status of those tasks are, what category they belong to, how long they took, and if there were any errors, I would be able to see those errors as well. And there is a NAP activity log. So this is telling me sort of more from a user perspective in NAP, who's doing what in NAP. There's clear logging of logging and audit trail of all the activities. And then finally, there is a desktop logins log as well. So this is really useful because it's telling me my end user activity. It's telling me when my end users are logging into the desktops at various times in the day. And this is important because then that gives us a clear idea for desktop usage. And that's what these charts over here show me, how many users are using my system and when are they logging into my system, because then that will allow me to decide when do I scale up my servers and when can I scale them down. All right, one other thing to show over here is our help center. This little help icon over here takes us to the Nerdio Help Center. We have a comprehensive knowledge-based database here. It's broken up based on what your role is, and it's got everything from some basic information like, hey, how do I log into my desktop, to advanced information like, hey, how do we synchronize users between Office 365, the Nerdio, and Azure Active Directory, and things like that. All right, so that about covers everything for Nerdio admin portal. We've got a few minutes here at the end to cover any question and answers. So please let me know if you have any questions. I have a question here about pricing. So let me answer the question about pricing in this way. The Nerdio for Azure, the Nerdio licenses are charged at $18 per user per month. But in addition to that pricing, you also need to be aware of three other components. There's, of course, the Azure pricing itself for using all the Azure resources. Then you also have to think about Office 365 user licenses, the E3 licenses. And then you also need to supply RDS licenses as well. So those are typically around $4.67 per user. But those are the four components from a pricing perspective. That is the Nerdio pricing at $18 per user per month. And then there is the Azure Office 365 and RDS licensing. And then as far as archived users go, earlier on in the users module, we saw there is a way to offboard an employee by simply archiving them. In that situation, you are not paying for that user, so there are no charges for that. But since we shut down their desktop, you would incur some minor storage costs from Azure for the desktop that is shut down and kept off to the side. Another question about the pricing. Is there any way to estimate the Azure costs? Yes, there is. Very soon here in the next week or so, we have a new feature coming out called the Cost Estimator. And that basically lets you sort of enter in the number of users you will have and what sort of desktops they will need, and what sort of discount maybe you as a partner are receiving from Microsoft for their Azure resources. And based on all of that, you would be able to estimate those Azure costs. In the meantime, we make a spreadsheet available to our partners to use to sort of plug in those numbers. But like I said, in the next week here, we are going to be making that spreadsheet, turn that into an actual feature in the Nerdio admin portal, and you would be able to sort of do that what-if analysis and estimate your Azure costs as well. All right, looks like those are all the questions we have today. Thank you everybody for joining. My contact information is up here on the screen. feel free to reach out to me. My email address is adalvi@getnerdio.com. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter @getnerdio. Thanks for joining and have a great rest of the day today.